Home is wherever I pass out. Concrete pillow stars blacked out. Drink come cheap when you black out. Wake up broke, still tapped out. Home is wherever I pass out. Any corner feel familiar now. I don't chase peace, I black it out. Home is wherever I pass out.
Big promises. Small-town Leroy Brooks believed in himself so hard it made other people uncomfortable. Not in a quiet, humble way either. Nah, Leroy believed in himself out loud, with hand gestures, with eye contact that lingered just a second too long, with that preacher meets barbershop tone that made folks nod even when they didn't understand what they was agreeing to. That's how he pulled into Marville, population 16,214, like he was arriving to save something. The sun wasn't even all the way up yet, but Leroy had the windows down, old school Randy B humming, one hand on the wheel, the other tapping rhythm on the door like he already knew the beat of the town. Behind his truck rolled the reason people either loved him or wanted to fight him, a life-size bronze statue of himself, helmet tucked under the arm, chin lifted, eyes aimed at a future that never quite showed up on time. The statue rattled on the trailer every time Leroy hit a pothole, which was often because Marville roads don't care about nobody's destiny. A farmer standing outside the gas station squinted at it. "What the hell is that?" the man asked. Leroy smiled like he'd been waiting his whole life for that question. "That," Leroy said, stepping out the truck, his belief made solid. The farmer stared. "You famous or something?" "Not yet," Leroy replied, "but I'm inevitable." Marville High School had a problem. Actually, Marville High had several problems. They hadn't had a winning football season in 9 years. The bleachers leaned slightly to the left. The booster club had more bake sales and touchdowns. And Hope was tired. That's why Leroy Brooks got the job. The school board didn't really understand how it happened either. One minute they was interviewing safe, quiet assistant coaches with real resumes. The next minute, Leroy was standing up, walking around the room, talking with his hands like he was explaining life itself. "I ain't here to coach plays," Leroy said. "I'm here to coach belief under pressure." One board member whispered, "Did he say belief?" Another whispered back, "I think so, but I kind of like it." Leroy slid a folder across the table. Inside were certificates. A lot of them: leadership, sports psychology, advanced offensive theory, all printed in high-quality color ink. Nobody noticed the website addresses didn't exist. The first meeting, the gym smelled like sweat, dust, and old disappointment. Players sat slouched on the bleachers, arms crossed, faces already prepared for lies they'd heard before. Leroy walked to center court and didn't say nothing at first, just stood there, let the silence stretch. Then he clapped once. "Fellas," he said, voice smooth, "I know what y'all thinking. Another dude finna come in here, promise championships, then disappear after homecoming." Some players nodded without meaning to. Leroy paced slow. "But I ain't that guy," a lineman muttered. "They all say that." Leroy snapped his head around, smiling. "And they all wrong," he said, "including me, if I don't prove it." That landed. Leroy pointed at the door, where the statue poster leaned against the wall. "I believe in putting pressure on myself first. That's why I bring that everywhere I go." A receiver raised his hand. "Coach, why it look like you?" Leroy didn't hesitate. "Because if I fail," he said, "I want it to be public." The room went quiet. That was Leroy's gift. He made losing sound honorable. Game 1. Hope is loud opening night. Stadium half full. Band loud like they overcompensating. The statue stood by the tunnel, freshly polished. Some kids rubbed its foot like it was holy. Marville was up by 3. Final minute. Assistant coach leaned in. "Coach, we kneel it?" Leroy looked at the field, looked at the crowd, then smiled. "Nah," he said. "We teach him how to be brave." They ran a play Leroy loved, misdirection, quick slant, timing based. Quarterback hesitated. Ball tipped, intercepted, scored the other way. Game over. The silence came fast. Real fast. Leroy clapped. "Bring it in," he yelled. Parents didn't move. Band stopped playing mid-note. Someone in the stands yelled, "Same damn story." Leroy nodded like he agreed. The statue dragged, so the first time it didn't even take an hour. Somebody yelled it first. "Drag it." Then another voice joined. Then a lot of them. Ropes came from trucks. Somebody spray-painted fraud across the statue's chest. Leroy watched from the locker room doorway. Didn't flinch. Didn't hide. Just sighed. Assistant coach shook his head. "They hate you, coach." Leroy shook his own. "Nah," he said. "They hate hope when don't pay out." That night, Leroy packed quiet, hooked the statue back up, left before sunrise. As he hit the highway, Leroy tapped the steering wheel and spoke to nobody. Hope, don't like overtime Leroy Brooks, didn't drive fast when he left Marville. He never did after a loss. Speed felt like panic, and panic felt like doubt. Leroy didn't do doubt. He drove steady, both hands on the wheel, eyes forward like the road owed him answers if he stared hard enough. The statue clanked behind him, chains humming, bronze scraping every time the trailer bounced. Somebody had chipped the nose clean off. Looked like Leroy had been in a fight. He didn't remember losing. He stopped at a rest area just past the state line. Bathroom smelled like regret and pine cleaner. Leroy leaned over the sink, stared at his reflection. Same confident eyes. Same smile, waiting in the wings. "You ain't wrong," he told himself. "You just early." That was his favorite lie. Old man Nelson was driving to town to see his grandchild. He pulled over to use the restroom. Saw the statue from his time when Coach Brooks was at his town school. He said, "That son of a bitch, let me get my phone." He took a picture and called to the AD to forward the picture to inform him. The AD said, "We will get to the bottom of it, I promise." The calls don't stop by noon. His phone was buzzing like it owed people money. Unknown numbers, local reporters. One voicemail from the superintendent that started polite and ended shaky. "Coach Brooks, the board feels maybe it's best we reevaluate leadership moving forward." Leroy deleted it halfway through. He hated goodbyes that pretended to be professional. He pulled over again, this time to eat. Small diner. Vinyl booths. Football game on mute. The waitress looked at the statue through the window. "That yours?" Leroy nodded. "Yeah." She tilted her head. "You famous?" "Not yet." She laughed. "You must be something else to drag a statue of yourself around." Leroy smiled. Belief gotta have weight. She didn't know what that meant, but she felt it anyway. Brought him extra fries. That's how it always went. Why they follow him, Leroy Brooks didn't talk like a coach. He talked like a man who had already survived the worst thing that could happen and came back calm. He didn't yell much. Didn't cuss players out. Didn't throw clipboards. He listened, nodded, let silence do half the work. Players trusted him, 'cause he looked like he trusted them. Parents trusted him, 'cause he shook their hands like equals. School boards trusted him, 'cause he spoke in full sentences and never once sounded unsure. Nobody ever asked him for proof. They asked him for hope. And Leroy sold that wholesale. A pattern he pretends not to see. Leroy's notebook sat on the passenger seat. Black cover. Corners bent. Smelled like sweat and cheap cologne. Inside, he didn't write playbooks. He wrote moments. Didn't kneel when I should have. Believed in magic instead of math. Wanted the story too bad. He never admitted out loud. But Leroy loved the idea of the win more than the win itself. The crowd roar. The interview clip. The "I told y'all" moment. He wanted it cinematic. Football don't care about cinema. Football cares about timeouts. The next town always looks the same 2 weeks later. Leroy rolled into Ashford, Indiana. Same Main Street. Same faded banners. Same "we used to be good" energy. High school mascot painted on the road like it was begging. He parked right by the field. Didn't even unhook the statue this time. Let it sit there, dusty, nose chipped like a warning label nobody read. The athletic director met him with a handshake too firm. "Coach Brooks," the man said, "we've heard things." Leroy nodded. "I hope so." The director squinted. "You lose a lot." Leroy smiled, calm as ever. I lose close, he said. Big difference. That did it. First practice, Ashford players came in skeptical. You could see it in their shoulders. One kid whispered, "That him?" "The statue dude." Leroy overheard. Didn't correct it. He gathered them at midfield. "I ain't here to erase your past," he said. "I'm here to give a reason." Somebody snorted. Leroy pointed straight at him. "You laughing, 'cause you scared to believe again," Leroy said. "I get that." The kid stopped laughing. That's the thing about Leroy. He didn't shame you. He named you. The promise at the booster meeting. Leroy stood in front of the chalkboard and didn't write nothing. Just talked. "Y'all don't need perfection," he said. "You need momentum." A dad asked, "Can you guarantee playoffs?" Leroy paused, then nodded. "Yeah," he said, "I can." The room buzzed. Assistant coach's eyes went wide. Leroy believed it when he said it. That was the dangerous part. Game 4. The turn Ashford started 3-1. Town buzzing. Statue polished. Local paper calling Leroy a culture shift. Game 4 was against a rival. Tie game. 30 seconds left. One timeout. Assistant coach whispered, "Coach, kick it." Leroy closed his eyes for half a second. Saw headlines. Saw smiles. Saw the story. "Nah," he said softly. "We end it now." They went for it. Fumble. Other team recovered. Field goal. Loss. The silence was familiar. Too familiar. The statue again this time. They didn't even yell. They just did it. Rope. Gravel. Spray paint. Somebody wrote almost across the chest. That one hurt more than fraud. Leroy watched from his truck, hands steady. Assistant coach finally snapped. "Why you always do that?" he yelled. "Why you never play it safe?" Leroy looked at him. "Because safe never loved nobody back," Leroy said. That assistant quit that night. On the road again, Ashford finished 4-6. Leroy packed. Left keys on the desk. Didn't argue. As he drove away, statue clanking behind him, Leroy spoke like he was praying. "One win," he said. "I don't need forgiveness. I need proof." The highway stretched out. Another town waited. Another promise warmed up in his chest. "Record don't define me," he said. "But one day, it will forgive me." The statue rattled behind him. Certified in confidence, Leroy Brooks had more certificates than wins. They stayed rolled up in a cracked leather tube. He kept on the back seat, right next to the notebook and the emergency whistle he never actually used. He treated them like diplomas from a life he almost lived. Truth was, none of them came from a place you could drive to. They came from late nights, cheap ink, and a laptop that overheated if you asked too much of it. But they looked good. Heavy paper. Gold seals. Fancy fonts that said things like Advanced Offensive Philosophy and Mental Toughness Accreditation. People didn't read certificates. They respected the confidence holding them. The check by the time Leroy hit Coldwater, Michigan, word had started traveling faster than his record. Not the losses. Everybody loses. It was the statue. Coldwater High's athletic director, Mrs. Henderson, met Leroy in her office with her arms crossed like she already didn't trust him but wanted it anyway. "I'll be honest, Coach Brooks," she said. "We had concerns." Leroy nodded slow. "Good," he said. "Means you care." She slid a folder across the desk. Inside were printouts, blog posts, message boards, a blurry photo of the statue being dragged. "Some folks say your certifications ain't verifiable." Leroy picked up the papers, glanced once, set them down like they bored him. "Let me ask you something," he said. "When y'all last won?" She sighed. 6 years. Leroy leaned forward. "You want to verify paper," he said, calm. "Or you want to verify belief?" She didn't answer right away. That pause? That was Leroy's opening. Why he never gets caught, Leroy never lied directly. He just talked around the truth. When asked where he studied, he'd say, "I've been learning my whole life." When asked who certified him, he'd say, "The game." When asked for proof, he'd smile and say, "Watch what happens." People filled in the blanks with hope. Coldwater hired him. First practice. Resetting the clock, Coldwater Cardinals had talent. Raw, undisciplined, angry. They'd been yelled at for years. Conditioned without explanation. Punished for losing like losing was a crime. Leroy didn't yell. He talked. "Y'all tired," he said. "Not of losing, of being treated like you don't matter when you do." A linebacker swallowed hard. That was the moment. The statue comes OFF the truck. Coldwater was the first place Leroy actually hesitated. The statue was scratched. Spray, paint half sanded off. Nose missing. For a second, Leroy thought about leaving it chained. Then he remembered who he was. He set it right at the stadium entrance. Kids stared. Parents whispered. Local papers snapped photos. Headline the next day. Confident or crazy. New coach arrives with statue. Leroy framed it. The season starts strong. Coldwater won the first 2 games. Not pretty wins. Gritty ones. Leroy called safe plays early. Ran the ball. Burned clock. Assistant coaches noticed. "You changing, coach?" one asked. Leroy smiled. "Learning," he said, but deep down he felt itchy. Safe didn't feel like him. The first crack, game 3. Up by 7. Fourth quarter. Ball on the opponent's 40. Field goal, puts it out of reach. Leroy stared at the field. Stared at the statue glowing under the lights. Stared at the future he wanted. "Go for it," he said. Assistant coach froze. "Coach, trust me." They didn't convert. Opposing team marched. Tied it. Overtime. Leroy didn't look at the clock. Didn't call timeout. Lost on a busted coverage. Final score. Loss. Silence. The itch was gone. The whisper that night. Leroy sat alone on the bleachers. Statue looming nearby. Mrs. Henderson approached. "Quiet." "You had it," she said. Leroy nodded. "I know." She hesitated. "Why didn't you kick?" Leroy looked up at the statue. "Because if I win small," he said, "I don't know who I become." She didn't understand, but she felt the weight of it. When belief starts costing money, Coldwater didn't turn on Leroy Brooks right away. They never did. Communities like that, small, hungry, overlooked, they cling to hope even when it start limping, especially when it talked nice and look you in the eye. After that overtime loss, folks still shook Leroy's hand, still told him next week, still brought cookies to practice like sugar could sweeten the blown coverage. Leroy nodded, smiled, thanked them. Inside, he was arguing with himself. The slide, Coldwater went 3, 1 of 3, 3 real quick. Losses stacked like unread mail. Every game was close. Every game had a moment. Every game had a decision Leroy would replay at night. A trick play on second and long. No timeout before halftime. Trusting a sophomore with nerves like loose change. Assistant coaches stopped asking questions. They just watched. The booster meeting the room was warm. Too warm. Folding chairs. Lemon pound cake. Nervous smiles. Booster president cleared his throat. "Coach Brooks," he said, "we love your passion." Leroy already knew what was coming. He leaned back, calm. "But," the man continued, "some parents got concerns." Leroy nodded. "About what?" The room shifted. "About expectations," someone said. Leroy smiled soft. "Expectations mean y'all believe," he replied. "That's good." Another voice sharper. "Belief don't change the scoreboard." That one landed. Leroy stood up slow. "I ain't promised perfection," he said. "I promise progress." A woman in the back whispered, "We was 5 last year." Silence. Leroy's jaw tightened just a touch. Coldwater's mayor stopped by practice one afternoon. Nice suit. Fake smile. "Coach," he said, nodding toward the statue. "Who paid for that?" Leroy didn't hesitate. "I did." The mayor raised an eyebrow. "With what?" Leroy smiled. "Faith," he said. The mayor didn't laugh. That statue had become a question nobody wanted to ask out loud. Game 7. The snap. Coldwater needed 2 wins to save the season. Game 7 was supposed to be easy. They were up by 10 at halftime. Leroy gave a speech that made grown men blink hard. "Finish," he told them. Not flashy, just faithful. Third quarter started fine. Then the penalties came. Missed tackle. Drop pass. Momentum slipped like a bad grip. Final drive. Coldwater up by 1. Ball at midfield. 1 first down ends it. Assistant coach whispered, "Run it." Leroy nodded, then changed his mind. "Play action," he said. The pass hung in the air too long. Intercepted. Returned to the 15. Field goal. Loss. The stadium didn't erupt this time. It exhaled. The whispers get louder next morning. Leroy's phone was full. Anonymous emails. School board requests. A local blogger asking real pointed questions. Where did Coach Brooks get certified? Why does his statue cost more than the weight room upgrades? Is confidence enough? Leroy didn't respond. He never argued with doubt. He out-talked it. The confrontation, Mrs. Henderson called Leroy into her office after practice. Door closed. She didn't sit. "Are your certifications real?" she asked. Leroy met her eyes. "They real to me," he said. She exhaled slow. "That ain't what I asked." Leroy leaned forward. "You hired me to win hearts first," he said. "That's what I'm doing." She shook her head. "You win hearts," she said. "Then you lose them." That hit harder than any loss. The final game, Coldwater finished 5-5. Last game didn't matter on paper. It mattered to Leroy. Win, and he'd finally leave a town hole. Fourth quarter. Tie game. Ball on the 20. Field goal wins it. Leroy stood still. No speeches. No vision. Just the math. He called timeout. Crowd leaned forward. He sent the kicker out. The kick went up and drifted. Wide right. Game over. This one wasn't loud. No chanting. No yelling. Just rope. Just dirt. Just tired people pulling disappointment through the street. Someone spray painted almost again. Leroy watched from the bus. Hands folded. Assistant coach whispered, "You okay?" Leroy nodded. "Yeah," he said. "I'm closer." On the road, again Coldwater was his third 5-5. The pattern was undeniable now. Close. Loved. Unfinished. As Leroy pulled on the highway, statue rattling behind him, he finally admitted out loud, "I don't know how to win," he said. The statue didn't answer, but the road did. It kept going. Almost famous Leroy Brooks went viral by accident. That's usually how it happens. Not when you're chasing attention, but when you talking like you ain't scared of being wrong. The video wasn't even supposed to leave the locker room. Some sophomore manager recorded on his phone, shaky hands, bad angle. Leroy pacing with sweat darkening the chest of his pullover like he'd been fighting somebody. They was down 17 at halftime. Season on life support. And Leroy didn't yell. "You ever notice," Leroy said, voice low, "how losing don't hurt till you start caring?" Players stared. "You numb right now," he continued. "That's worse than pain. Pain means you're still alive in it." He stopped pacing, pointed at each kid like he was counting them. "I don't need heroes. I need honest effort under pressure. That's it." One kid wiped his face. Leroy leaned in. "Win or lose," he said, "we walk out together. Ain't nobody running from this." They lost anyway, but they fought. And that video, somebody uploaded it. Monday morning by 9 a.m., Leroy's phone was useless. Notifications stacking like unread bills. Sports blogs. Motivational pages. A morning show DM asking for permission to repost. The caption read, "This coach will make you believe again." Leroy watched the video once. Didn't smile. Didn't cringe. Just nodded like he recognized himself. The next town calls first for the first time. Leroy didn't have to apply. Rollingwood High reached out. Football town. High expectations. Money involved. Athletic director said, "We need culture." Leroy said, "I do culture." They flew him out. First class. Statue shipped separately. Rollingwood High didn't know what was buying Rollingwood High had banners. Real ones. Old trophies. Winning history. Angry alumni. They weren't desperate. They were impatient. Leroy stood in front of the board, confident as ever. "You don't need schemes," he said. "You need unity." A man in the corner frowned. We need wins. Leroy smiled. They'll come. That was enough. Press conference cameras, mics, flash bulbs. Leroy stepped up, statue behind him. Reporter asked, Coach Brooks, your records? Inconsistent. Leroy nodded. So is life, he said, but I ain't inconsistent in belief. Clips went everywhere. Comments split. Genius. Fraud. Let him cook. Leroy didn't read comments. He read faces. The Team Riverside players were talented. Too talented to be patient. Quarterback asked straight up, We running trick plays? Leroy shook his head. We running discipline. They didn't trust him yet. They would. First game, national spotlight, ESPN regional cameras. Statue polished. Bam loud. Crowd full. Rolling Wood up by 3. 2 minutes left. Leroy had a decision. He chose safe. Kneel. Run. Punt. Defense blew coverage. Touchdown. Loss. Boos fell heavy. Leroy nodded. Familiar sound. After the game, locker room tense. One player spoke up. Coach, what do you believe in? Leroy met his eyes. I believe in staying, he said. When it get ugly. That wasn't the answer they wanted, but it was the one he had. The internet turns memes popped up. Statue with clown makeup. Caption, born loser. Leroy didn't fight it. He leaned into it, printed the meme, pinned it in his office. This, he told staff, is pressure. 3 games in 1, 2 every loss by 1 score. Every win ugly. Every interview, the same question. When will you finally break through? Leroy smiled every time. Soon, he said, but late at night, alone, he whispered something else. I don't know how. When a joke ain't funny no more by mid-season, Riverside didn't know what to do with Leroy Brooks. They wanted to love him. You could feel that part. The speeches still hit. The locker room still listened. Kids still played hard like they didn't want to let him down. But Friday nights don't run on vibes. They run on numbers. And Leroy's numbers were doing that same ugly dance again. The record everybody knows week 5. 2. 3 week 6. 2. For every loss came the same way. Late lead. Bad clock. 1 decision. Local radio stopped being polite. One caller said, he don't coach football, he coach feelings. Another said, that statue cursed. Leroy heard it all, never responded, just nodded at practice like nothing had changed. That's what scared people. The national moment Game 7 was televised. Night game. Packed house. Cameras everywhere. Riverside was up 21, 10 entering the 4th. This was it. This was the one. Leroy stood calm on the sideline, hand behind his back, eyes steady. Assistant coach leaned in. Coach, we bleed the clock. Leroy nodded. First drive. Run, punt. Defense gave up a score. Next drive. Conservative again. Another score. Tie game. Crowd buzzing now, not hopeful, nervous. Final drive. 2 minutes left. Ball at the 35. Field goal range. Timeout left. Leroy stared at the scoreboard like it was asking him a personal question. Kick it or make a moment. He called a pass. Incomplete. Clock stopped. Second down. Pass again. Sack. Clock running. No timeout. Panic. They rushed the kick. Blocked. Return. Touchdown. Stadium exploded, not with joy, but with disbelief. Rolling Wood lost 28-21. Live. National. Unavoidable. It happened fast. Someone jumped the barrier. Another followed. Cameras didn't cut away. They never do when it's ugly. Rope around the statue. Crowd chanting. Born. Losiar. Braun scraped concrete as the statue tipped and slammed. The helmet snapped clean off. Leroy watched from the sideline. Didn't move. Didn't flinch. Didn't look away. Somewhere deep, something finally cracked. Not loud, not dramatic. Just tired. The locker room after nobody talked. No speeches left. A senior stood up. Coach, he said, voice shaking. We gave you everything. Leroy nodded. I know. Another player asked, "Why never enough?" Leroy opened his mouth, closed it. For the first time, he didn't have words. Next morning, closed door, school board, athletic director, lawyer in the corner. They didn't yell. That hurt worse. "We appreciate the culture you built," the AD said. "But the season's gone." Leroy nodded. "What's my record?" he asked. The AD hesitated. 4-6. There was again, like a ghost that followed him town to town. "We're letting you finish the season," the AD said. "But after that..." Leroy stood. "You don't gotta explain," he said. "I understand patterns." That night, Leroy sat in his motel room. Statue chained outside, broken leaning, phone face down, notebook open. For the first time, he didn't write a moment. He wrote a question. What if this is who I am? He stared at it for a long time, thought about leaving the statue, selling the truck, getting a regular job where nobody expected miracles. Then he laughed, soft, bitter. "I ain't built for normal," he said out loud. He closed a notebook. The final game of Rolling Wood high-no cameras. Half-empty stands. Cold wind. Rolling Wood won. Barely. Nobody rushed the field. Nobody cried. It felt unfinished. Leroy shook hands. Packed quiet. Left the keys. Didn't take the statue. He stood there a minute, looking at it cracked and leaning. Then he went back. Hooked it up anyway. On the road again, record final. 4-6 again. As Leroy drove out of Riverside, radio low, statue rattling behind him, he finally said the thing he'd been avoiding. "Maybe I ain't meant to win a lot. Pause. But I ain't quitting till I win once." The road didn't argue. The town that almost didn't take him by the time Leroy Brooks rolled into Mason's Crossing, West Virginia. He wasn't famous anymore. He was infamous. The viral clips had cooled. The memes moved on to fresher jokes. His name still rang, but now it came with sigh attached. "Oh, that guy." The truck coughed when he downshifted. Check engine light been on so long, it felt decorative. The statue rattled like it was tired of coming along, but didn't know how to stay behind. Mason's Crossing didn't look like a place that needed saving. It looked like a place that had already accepted losing. No one called him that was new. Leroy had spent 3 weeks driving, stopping, asking. Emails unanswered. Voicemails polite but firm. One AD laughed and hung up. "You got too much baggage," one told him. Leroy nodded like he agreed. That statue was a whole resume by itself now. The last shot Mason's Crossing high wasn't even on the map for football. No banners. No pack stands. Just rusted bleachers and a scoreboard that flickered like it was thinking about retirement. The principal, Mr. Keene, met Leroy outside instead of in an office. Straight shooter. No coffee offered. "We ain't got money," Keene said. "We ain't got patience. And we sure ain't got room for drama." Leroy smiled small. "I ain't dramatic," he said. "I'm consistent." Keene looked at the statue. "That thing a joke?" Leroy shook his head. "It's a reminder." "Of what?" "Of what happens when belief outpaces results." Keene stared at him a long second. "Season's already started," he said. 2 games in, both losses. Leroy's heart beat faster. He loved broken things. Keene laid it out clean. 1-year contract, he said. Low pay. No bonuses. No promises. Leroy nodded. "No statue on the field," Keene added. That one hurt. Leroy hesitated, then nodded again. "Fair," he said. They shook hands. This time, it didn't feel like destiny. It felt like survival. Mason's Crossing players didn't know who Leroy was. Didn't care either. They were small, outmatched, tired of speeches. First practice, Leroy started talking. One kid yawned. Leroy stopped. "You don't owe me attention," he said. "You owe yourself effort." That landed different. He doesn't unload the statue. Leroy left the statue chain behind the stadium, covered it with a tarp, didn't look at it much. For the first time, he wasn't coaching for an image. He was coaching to breathe. Game 3. Nothing fancy, no trick plays, no speeches, just fundamentals. They lost. But it wasn't ugly. Leroy didn't smile, didn't spin it. He told the team, "We fixed what broke." Players nodded. That was new. Leroy stayed in a cheap room above a barbershop. He didn't watch old highlights. He didn't replay losses. He slept, woke up early, drew plays simple enough to survive pressure. He was learning something dangerous. Restraint. Game 4. They lost again, but this time by 3. Fans didn't boo. They clapped, soft at first, then louder. Leroy felt in his chest. Not hope, trust. Learning how not to lose Mason's Crossing still ain't believe in Leroy Brooks. Not really, but they stopped waiting on him to mess it up. That was progress. You could feel it at practice. Less side-eye, more listening. Kids stopped looking at the scoreboard during drills. They started finishing reps. Leroy noticed, didn't say nothing. He learned that sometimes talking too much blocks the lesson. Leroy sat alone late, clicking through tape. Not highlight tape, not motivational clips. Mistakes, missed blocks, bad angles, bad timing. But this time, he didn't write speeches next to them. He wrote corrections. Call timeout. Take the points. Stop chasing moments. That last one stayed underlined. One night, Leroy pulled the tarp back. Moonlight hit the statue's cracked face. It didn't look proud no more. It looked tired. "You've been louder than me," Leroy said out loud. The statue didn't argue. He covered it back up. Mason's Crossing was down by 2. Final drive. Ball on the 18. Leroy called timeout. Crowd leaned in. Field goal wins it. Kicker lined up. Snap. Hold. Kick. Off the upright. Mississippi loss. The crowd groaned. Then clapped. That sound shook Leroy more than boos ever had. After the game, a lineman named Caleb sat next to Leroy. "You different," Caleb said. Leroy nodded. "Yeah, you ain't promising stuff." "I'm tired of lying," Leroy replied. Caleb smiled. "Good. We ain't stupid." Usually by mid-season, players started disappearing. Jobs, grades, excuses. Not this time. Everybody showed, even the ones who didn't play. Leroy saw it and felt something twist. This was working. That scared him more than losing. Game 6, the test rain. Mud. Cold. Perfect night to mess it up. Tie game. Third quarter. Fourth and inches. Old Leroy would have gone for it. New Leroy stared at the chains. Called punt. Assistant coach blinked. "You sure?" Leroy nodded. Field position. They won by 1 later. Leroy didn't smile. He exhaled. After 6 games, 1, 5 same as always. But it didn't feel the same. A letter showed up at the school. No return address. Inside, printed screenshots. Old message boards. Fake certification breakdowns. Someone was digging again. Keene called Leroy, Indiana. "They watching you," Keene said. Leroy nodded. "I know." "You gonna run?" Leroy shook his head. "Not till it's over." Leroy sat in his room, notebook open. Instead of promises, he wrote, "If I win once, I stop." He stared at it. Didn't know what it meant yet, but it felt honest. The one nobody sees coming Mason's Crossing didn't wake up believing in miracles. They woke up expecting the same thing they always got: cold mornings, bad roads, and a football team folks love despite the scoreboard. That's why nobody noticed at first. Not the way practice felt sharper. Not the way players jogged back to the huddle instead of walking. Not the way Leroy Brooks stopped talking like he was auditioning for something. He coached like a man who didn't need to be heard. Game week felt normal. No posters. No local paper hype. No radio interviews. Leroy declined all of it. "Let it be quiet," he told Mr. Keene. Keene nodded. He liked quiet. The statue stayed covered behind the stadium. Rust on the chains. Paint flaking. Leroy didn't touch it. Oak Hill High came in confident. Bigger line. Better record. Loud parents. They didn't even look at Mason's Crossing during warm-ups. Leroy noticed that. Didn't say nothing. The game starts first quarter. Mason's Crossing ran the ball. 3 yards. 4 yards, 3 yards, punt, defense held. Second drive, same thing. Oak Hill started getting annoyed. Annoyance leads to mistakes. Leroy liked that. Halftime score, 7-6, Clearfield. Locker room quiet. No speeches. Leroy pointed at the board. "We right where we supposed to be," he said. That was it. Players nodded. They trusted him now. Mason's crossing forced a turnover. Ball at the 30. Assistant coach leaned in. "This it," he whispered. Leroy felt the itch. The old itch. He shook his head. "Run it." They scored anyway. Touchdown. Crowd stood, surprised at themselves. Mason's crossing led 13-7. Somebody uncovered the statue. Kids touched it again. Whispered. Hope tried to sneak back in. Leroy saw it from the sideline. Looked away. Fourth quarter. Holding on Oak Hill pushed back. Tied it up. 13-13. 5 minutes left. Mason's crossing got the ball. This was always where Leroy lost it. Always where he chased the ending. He called timeout. Not to inspire. To think. 3rd and 4. Field goal range. Old Leroy would have gone for something clever. New Leroy trusted his line. Run up the middle. First down. Clock moved. Crowd held its breath. The kick sets up final minute. Ball at the 10. Leroy called timeout. Kicker jogged out. Rain started falling. Snap. Hold. Kick. Up. Straight. But a flag. Offsides. No play. Leroy closed his eyes. Old ghost knocking. Reset. He walked over to the kicker. Didn't say much. "Same swing," he said. Kicker nodded. Second try snap. Hold. Kick. The ball sailed. Split the uprights. Mason's crossing led 16-13. 30 seconds left. Assistant coach grabbed Leroy. "You did it," he whispered. Leroy shook his head. "Not yet." He'd been here before. 30 seconds. That's how long it takes to lose a reputation. That's how long it takes for a town to remember why it stopped believing. Oak Hill had the ball at their own 25. Rain slicked the field. Lights buzzed overhead. Crowd went silent in that nervous way, not faith, just fear waiting to be right. Leroy stood still. No pacing. No yelling. Hands behind his back like he belonged there. The first play Clearfield came out throwing. 5-yard out. Receiver slipped. Incomplete. Clock stopped. Leroy didn't blink. The second play shotgun. Blitz came late. Quarterback panicked. Ball sailed. Overthrown. 3rd and 10. Oak Hill sideline started yelling now. That's when Leroy knew. Pressure always talks. 3rd and 10 assistant coach leaned in. They gonna take a shot. Leroy nodded. Let him. Defense dropped back. Corner bit. Receiver broke free for half second. Ball released. Safety closed. Hit landed hard. Ball popped loose. Incomplete. 4th down. 7 seconds left. Oak Hill lined up for a Hail Mary. Leroy called timeout. Crowd groaned. Old Leroy would have rushed it. Let chaos decide. New Leroy wanted eyes steady. He walked to the defense. Don't win it, he said. Just don't lose it. They nodded. The final snap, 7 seconds. Snap. Quarterback rolled left. Rain blurred everything. He threw it. High. Too high. Ball tipped at the goal line. Hit the ground. Zeros. Silence first, no cheering. Not yet. Like the town didn't trust what it saw. Ref raised his arms. Game over. Then it hit, sound exploded. Kids screamed. Parents hugged strangers. Old men cried without wiping their eyes. Mason's crossing won. 16-13. Leroy stayed, still players rushed him. He didn't move. Didn't smile. Just breathed. Like a man who'd finally stopped drowning. Someone ran to the statue. Pulled the tarp off completely. Paint chipped. Face cracked. It didn't look powerful. It looked tired. Just like Leroy once did. Reporters shoved a mic at him. How's it feel to finally win one? Leroy paused. Feels like work, he said. And we ain't done. He walked away. Late night locker room emptied. Rain stopped. Leroy sat alone. Looked at the board. 16. 13 still written there. He didn't erase it. What changed? They didn't win because of luck. They didn't win because of belief. They won because nobody tried to be more than they were. That was new. That was dangerous. Leroy Brooks wasn't used to attention. He wasn't used to cameras in his face. Cameras in the locker room. Cameras outside his motel. Cameras asking the same question he hated to answer. How does it feel to finally win? The morning after the win against Oak Hill High still smelled like wet grass and mud on his clothes. He sat on the curb outside the stadium, jacket zipped, head down, coffee steaming in one hand. Somebody tapped his shoulder. Local reporter. Too young. Too loud. "Coach, can we get a quote?" Leroy didn't answer. Didn't move. "I'm serious, Coach," she said. "This could go national." Leroy finally looked up. Calm as ever. "You want the story?" he said. "Go write it. I'm just driving the bus." The Masons Crossing bus didn't care about cameras. Neither did Leroy. Statue back in the truck. Chained, covered. He avoided looking at it. It had always been too loud. By noon, Leroy's phone wouldn't stop buzzing. National sports blogs. Regional TV stations. Tweets calling him a hero. Tweets calling him a fraud. Somebody even sent a message asking about his certifications again. "Prove you belong." Leroy stared at the text. Tapped it once. Deleted it. Principal Keene called in the afternoon. "Coach Brooks, congratulations," he said. "But you know they're watching now." Leroy sipped his coffee. "I know. They want a winning streak," Keene added. Do you think you can do it?" Leroy exhaled. He hadn't thought about streaks before. "When once was hard enough," he said. Keene laughed nervously. "Yeah, I get it." The first post-win practice. Leroy did everything different. No speeches. No motivational cliches. Just drills. Line drills. Coverage drills. Plays that had no flash. No tricks. Players didn't mind. They noticed one thing. Coach wasn't promising glory. He was demanding work. Next day, a film crew showed up at practice. Some regional channel wanted to film the team, the statue, Leroy, the town. Leroy walked past them, eyes forward, ignored the cameras. The cameraman whispered, "He's nuts." Assistant coach muttered, "Or a genius." Leroy heard neither. He kept walking. While Leroy sorted plays, his phone rang again. Unknown number. He ignored it. Next day, voicemail. "Coach Brooks, we're checking into your certifications. Expect an inspector. Soon. Congratulations on the win." Leroy sat down. For the first time since he could remember, the confidence wavered slightly. He wasn't worried about losing. He was worried about finally winning and what it meant. Statue still chained in the parking lot. Rain dripping off his helmet. Cracks catching the streetlight. Leroy sat in his room. Notebook open. He didn't write plays. He wrote a warning. One win doesn't fix the past. It exposes it. The first time he'd ever feared the win more than the loss. The knock on the motel door came at 8:03 a.m. Leroy Brooks didn't jump. He didn't flinch. He had learned over years that surprises were usually loud, messy, and costly. "Coach Brooks." A voice sharp enough to cut through steel. Leroy opened the door halfway. A man in a press suit, thin glasses, clipboard in hand. "Inspector Jameson. Federal. We're here regarding your coaching certifications." Leroy's smile was calm. "Come in, sir," he said. He stepped aside. "You hungry?" "Coffee." Jameson didn't flinch. "Not here to drink coffee. Here to verify your credentials. We've received complaints that some of your coaching certificates are fraudulent." Leroy nodded slowly. "Yeah, I figured somebody would notice after the win." The inspector laid papers across the motel table. "Coach Brooks, these certificates. None of these institutions exist." "Some do," Leroy said. "Some don't. Depends on how you define existence." Jameson blinked. "This is federal." Leroy leaned back. "Tell me, I won once. Isn't that what matters?" Jameson shook his head. "No, sir, winning games doesn't erase fraud." By noon, the story was everywhere. Coach wins once. Faces federal probe. Bronze statue, real trouble. Mason's Crossing, miracle or scam? Social media split clean. Some cheered. The underdog wins. Some jeered. Fraud alert. He's done. Leroy ignored it. He had one rule now. Focus on the team. Ignore the noise. Players showed up after school. "Coach, we don't care what they say," Caleb said, stepping up front. Other players nodded. "Yeah," said another. "We won with you. That's enough." Leroy felt it. Something warm in the chest. Something he never had after a loss. They believed. Not in the certificates. Not in the press. In him. The first meeting with the Inspector Jameson visited the stadium. Statue chained in the corner. Players warming up in drizzle. Leroy watched the inspection quietly. "Coach Brooks," Jameson said, "you pay for the statue?" "Yes," Leroy replied. "My investment in belief." Jameson scribbled notes. "You do know this is evidence now?" Leroy shrugged. "Yeah, it's evidence I tried." Pressure builds next game. The cameras were back. National news crew, local radio, bloggers, fans from nearby towns. Mason's Crossing showed up in full force. Signs, banners, chants. Brooks believes. One win is enough. Leroy didn't smile at the chants. He walked onto the field like it was any other Friday night. No hype, just business. The result of Pressure's second game of the week, another close match. Ball on Mason's Crossing's 5-yard line. 4th down, 10 seconds left. Old Leroy would have panicked. Old Leroy would have tried a trick play. New Leroy called the simplest play he had. Touchdown. Mason's Crossing led by 1. Final seconds ticked down. They held. Victory. After the game, players rushed him, lifted him off his feet. Fans cheered. But Leroy only stood there. He knew the next battle wasn't on the field. Inspector Jameson waited on the sidelines, waiting for the law to catch up. For the first time, Leroy Brooks realized winning changes nothing but makes everything louder.
Home is wherever I pass out. Concrete pillow stars blacked out. Dream come cheap when you black out. Wake up broke, still tapped out. Home is wherever I pass out. Any corner feel familiar now. I don't chase peace, I black it out. Home is wherever I pass out. No regrets. Do it big hope, old English. No regrets, more regrets. I don't remember addresses, I remember sensations. Cold ground, warm bottle, that's my reservation. People say get stable, I say define that. I'll be steady falling, ain't nothing tighter than that. I drink 'cause my brain won't shut.